Hey there, everybody. I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, and thank you so much for joining me here on episode number 56 of the Weekly Ratchet. Spring is in the air, and board games have been on my table. Let me tell you all about them right here on the Weekly Ratchet. Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to the Weekly Ratchet. Thank you so much for joining me here. As always, I hope you've had a fantastic week of getting to play games with family and or friends. I haven't been doing a whole lot of that myself. I'll tell you why here in a little bit. But first of all, as you can see with the open window behind me, it's another evening here in Virginia. So that means it's time for another cold beer. In fact, this time it is Chameleon Green from Center of the Universe Brewing Company. I've talked about this place quite a bit. They always have a chameleon on draft, and they always kind of have a different color every couple of months. When we moved here, it was green and yellow and red. They did a blue, they did a black, a silver. I don't think they ever did a purple. They did a white, and then they started to come back around with some other colors. They have a green out again, and then we just found out that this is going to be the last one. They're discontinuing one of their most popular beers. We have no idea why. I love this beer. It's one of the main reasons I go there. So I'm not sure what that's going to say for future gaming at Center of the Universe, but oh well. Anyways, one other thing to kind of open up the show here with is, well, another little bit of bad news. You see, there's actually been another death in the family. Not what I'm going to dedicate a whole episode to, don't worry about it, but, well, this little plant of mine has passed away. You've seen this behind me in many episodes of this show and other reviews that I've done here on this channel and the Dice Tower for quite a while. I picked it up from IKEA, I don't know, 2 years ago when I moved here. Got some more calyxes and some carpets for the floor, and I picked up a plant or two. The first one died almost immediately. This one hung in a while. It was showing a little brown, and so a few months ago we had like an Indian summer, and I stuck it outside, let it get some sun. It lightly rained that afternoon, and then I forgot about it. And it got really cold and really nasty, and my wife brought it inside, but it was too late. So, yeah, I'm not really a green thumb kind of person. We're not really a green thumb family, to be honest with you. Even my mom has always wanted to have like a garden. Has just never quite been able to pull it off. I do have another little plant you can see here over my shoulder. It's not going to get a name or a gender because it's fake. It's just, I can't be bothered with this whole plant thing, but I wanted that, sort of representation of some life behind me. I kind of thought it's going to make the scenes look a little bit more alive, even though it's not. Anyways, enough of that. So yeah, one of the reasons I haven't done a lot of gaming is that I've been doing a lot of 3D printing lately. I haven't touched my 3D printer in many, many months. I was having a lot of problems with it last year with the multicolor, what they call the multi-material unit from Prusa, the MMU. And I know what's wrong with it, and I have the parts to replace it, but of course I have to completely tear the thing apart. And then I found out that there was new versions of the printer itself, and so I ordered all the parts to do that. But again, I have to completely dismantle the printer and put it all back together. So before I did that, I started printing off some pieces for the new printer that doesn't require multi-material, but I wanted to change the color. They always use this kind of black and orange on the Prusa stuff, and I want to do my own color. So I got this kind of nice water, ocean blue, which is really, really pretty, and it printed flawlessly. Again, I'm not using the MMU because it's flat out broken, but the printer itself is doing okay, and I was a little inspired, and I've just been printing like crazy. I'm going to talk a little bit more here about it at the end of the Question of the Week segment because we're going to segue into it quite perfectly. But anyway, so that's kind of one reason why I haven't been gaming, and another reason why I'm a little late filming. I have found that for some reason, I'm one of those folks who can just sit there and watch a 3D printer for too long. It's almost like just mesmerizing to watch those things work. So anyways, that's what I have been up to. About ready to get into the show here, but there's just one other thing. And I don't know when this is going to happen exactly, so it might be prior to the next Ratchet going out. But keep an eye out on the social media channels here of Tabletop Toolbox, either the Facebook page or here on YouTube. I might do just a post about it. Something kind of fun. Looks like it's going to be happening. I don't want to jinx myself. I'm not going to share what it is quite yet. But as soon as it happens, y'all will be the first to know. So I'm really excited for it. And it could do some decent stuff for the channel. We will find out. Anyways, I think that's all of it here. Just a lighter episode here today. Only 2 games have come in. I've only played 2 games. One of them you've heard about. One of them is new. And some decent answers to question of the week. So let's go ahead and get to an exciting number 56 of the Weekly Ratchet. All right, hopefully I can keep this kind of raspy voice of mine away. 2 games here to chat about. The first one is Fields of Arle. This is from Uwe Rosenberg. This was, if you remember, the last game that we played during Cabin Con 2 weeks ago. I think it was only 2 weeks ago. Maybe it was 3. I've lost track. But I enjoyed this game. I wouldn't call myself like a super Uwe fan. There's a lot of his games I haven't played yet. He has a lot of games, to be fair. It's a little difficult to do. There are some that obviously I don't care for. Feast for Odin did not click with me at all. Agricola and Caverna are just difficult games. But I did like, I like Hallertau a good bit. I liked this one a good bit. I enjoyed the Ottawa game was kind of neat. Glass Road was kind of neat. I'm really hoping to play the other Black Forest, I think it's called. I'm hoping I can check that out. I was trying to see if Daniel was going to buy it. He decided not to. But anyways, I really enjoyed this. The only thing, as I mentioned in that episode, was that I did kind of feel like the economy of the game kind of died out at the end. It was all about production. But there's that kind of last step that it seems to fall flat. And that was that I had a bunch of sheep. I was able to make wool very easily, and I could convert it into kind of like textiles or whatever it was, but I couldn't convert it into clothing easily at all. It took a lot of effort to make clothing, but I'm going to play with it. I did enjoy the system overall. It's a 1 to 2 player game, and so I'm kind of looking forward to checking out that one solo. That is Fields of Arle. I had to double check the title. And then, what's this one? I got the Last Command game. That's right. This finally showed up from Ty McDonald and Sentient Games. This is the dual deck builder that I have talked about quite a bit here on the channel and across the Weekly Ratchet episodes. Ty is fairly active in the chat, and I'm sure we're going to hear from him in episode number 57. But anyways, I was really excited when this came in. This is kind of cool too. He's got a sleeve on the box. Oh, did you catch that, Greg? Anyway, he's got a sleeve here on the box, and it's obviously this sort of these capital ships that are dueling with each other, but he's got a version where kind of like the good guys are on the cover and the bad guys are on the cover. And I just thought that was kind of neat. He even kind of flipped the image. You probably can't see it here too well, but there's a fleet of ships right, I think there. And then the other image, they're being attacked. Maybe it's over on this side. I can't quite tell. But anyways, they actually kind of flipped the entire scene, which I thought was pretty neat. Anyways, I did get a quick chance. I went ahead and I sleeved this because it came with sleeves. The Kickstarter edition came with sleeves. And I do usually sleeve my deck building games. I talked about that many episodes ago. And I was really, really excited to see some of the new art. When I last played this, obviously, it was a prototype. And so it's been really neat to get to see how the art evolved a good bit from that original version. I think the art was the one thing that I was kind of like, a little cartoonish for me. But it definitely stepped up a good bit in the final edition. So I haven't got a chance to play it yet. Hoping that I can get to do that here fairly soon. We're still not really big on the attacking fighting games, but that one is just so much fun with the combos that you can set up between your system cards and your crew cards. Anyways, there'll be more content here in the channel about that game coming fairly soon. That is it for new games. Let's go ahead and get the question of the week. Here we go, kicking off question of the week. Last week, I wanted to make things nice and happy and positive. I asked you to tell me just something that inside of a board game box makes you happy. What is it inside of a box that you just always get excited when you see? And I got a lot of good answers. I got a couple of similar answers. I'll go ahead and start off with those. That first was Mike Heller, who said the number one thing that makes him happy is a slip of paper with color pictures describing what everything is and how to get it back into the box later. Along that lines, Ryan Combs said he too loves when a game has instructions on how to store everything as well as an insert for everything instead of 100 loose baggies. Wayne Kruger said that, well, in lieu of finding $1 million inside the box, he too would have to vote for a here's how to put everything into the box sheet right on top. And lastly, Penny said she'd have to agree with the others that especially with a complicated game, she wants a guide that shows where everything goes. I have certainly been on the other side of that, right? Trying to organize a big complicated box and just having no idea, especially when you have a bunch of trays with just square compartments in them or long rectangular compartments, and you can't figure out, are these to store long things or are they to store a bunch of small things vertically stacked? I have no idea. So yeah, definitely an image that shows how it kind of all goes is great. And in fact, I'm trying to figure out how to do something like that quite myself. I'll get to that here when we talk about 3D printing in a little bit. Wonderflonium said, and I love this, box lids with little cutouts to make it easier to open. Yeah, I know what you mean. And in fact, the new game Galactic Cruise has that. Just their little half circle notches on the outer lid of the box. It just kind of helps you get your fingers in there. And in fact, what's great about it is it kind of helps you pull the sides open just a little bit to release that suction. And you don't get that loud, obnoxious box fart or lift the whole box up off the table when you're just trying to get the lid off. So I can understand that one. That was a pretty good one. Teshra said he loves an insert that is designed to make the game easy to set up, naming Unsettled as a game that does this very well. I do know the Unsettled trays. It's been a long time since I played that, but I do know that one. And I know what you mean as well. Yeah, it's when I think of the inserts that I've made, that's always been my goal is, as Wonderflonium, as Ryan Combs said, I want to get rid of all those bags. I want to get rid of all those just loose piles of stuff all over the table, and I want to condense it all into one little tray because A, it drastically shrinks the table space. B, I'm not going all over the room trying to find all my different little organizers. As much as I love the idea of little silicone cups or little organizer trays that can kind of be used universally, I do love the idea of just it's right there in the box. I lift the lid, I pull it out, I set it on the table, and like 5 minutes of setup is finished just like that. So I can certainly agree with that one. CR Poll said that he agreed with Teshra, adding that a nice thank you for buying this game card has a nice effect as well. I've seen that a couple times too. I know a lot of the it's not Eagle Griffin games, a lot of the Vital Lacerda games will do that as well. Either like a thank you note or a signed sort of a postcard or something about the game. I can tell you too, as doing some Kickstarter previews, I've gotten some little personalized notes sometimes in a box. Hey, thanks for checking out this game. Looking forward to seeing the content. And you're right, that just kind of gives you a nice personal feel, right? Makes you feel good about supporting that company, supporting that publisher, designer, etc. Rentless said he's simply happy to see a game box that's just the right size for its components, adding that he'd rather not have a game of Tetris to make it close correctly. Yeah, I've chatted about here in the past about some of these games that, comes with this much stuff in it and is this massive box. Those drive me nuts. But then, of course, the opposite is true, right? A game that is just so packed tight that either it maybe doesn't give you a guide and tells you how to put it all away, or maybe it's still just, even with all the baggies and such, it's just a really, really tight fit. So yeah, when it kind of just all comes together nice and neat and easy, that is definitely a welcome sign. Bored Halfling says he loves seeing enough room, presumably in inserts, for sleeved cards. Yeah, I know this is tricky, and I'll tell you, as someone who has designed inserts for games, for myself usually, and then sometimes puts them out online, I've definitely gotten those kind of complaints like, oh, this doesn't fit sleeved cards. I'm like, oh, and the problem is I don't sleeve my cards. And the problem is, I can maybe kind of estimate the added width and the added height, for a card to lay flat in a tray. But man, I can't even begin to estimate how much thicker the deck is going to get with all those sleeves. And I wonder if that's the challenge. I wonder if just that kind of estimation of just how, what size sleeves are people going to get? Maybe they're going to get thicker ones than we might think to use. And so, I certainly get it. And I know that, I've gotten some games, especially deck building games, that I like to sleeve. In fact, even the Last Command game, the Last Command game, I sleeved all the cards and they just kind of barely fit into the inserts there or into the sort of compartments inside the vacuum formed insert. And I've got some of the Imperium games, some of the other deck builder games that I have where they're stored the cards vertically, but it uses kind of rounded corners. And so when you go and you put your sleeves in, which have a hard corner, which is one of the reasons why I don't like sleeve cards, but they don't fit. They kind of scrunch all up, they get all bunched up, and then you pull out that deck of cards later and all the corners are all messed up. You can't shuffle the cards. It's a pain in the butt. So I get it, but it's tough both ways. When it comes to sleeve cards, it's a challenge. When I mentioned this, I talked about Galactic Cruise. That was a game that, I had seen something in it that really excited me, and I couldn't remember what it was. Jamie Wiley said that he too thought of Galactic Cruise and the fact that they add little recycle icons to pieces in the punch board that you don't need to keep, adding, "Thank you for releasing me from keeping that token for all eternity." Yeah, I think what it was for me with Galactic Cruise, it was, I believe, the player trays, which have all of your components, your workers, the upgrades that sit on your player boards. But then it has at the top of each compartment, or I should say at the top of two compartments, the one that holds your resources and the one that holds your upgrade tokens on your launch pad, there's a notch at the top of that compartment that holds your starting nose cone and tailpiece for your initial rocket. And so you don't even notice them at first. You don't realize that there's an extra little indent there at the top of the tray, and your pieces fit into that just perfectly. And so all your player stuff very nice and neatly fits into that tray. It's not too tricky to get everything into there. I think that's what it was for me with that game. Yukon Zach said he loves seeing unique player figures or meeples inside of the box. Yeah, absolutely nothing wrong with some good screen printed meeples or just some unique pieces. I have something to chat about that again here in a moment. Ecto Fox said he loves opening a box and seeing a unique thematic component like Ticket to Ride Legacy, which has... Geez, Jeff, what are you thinking? That was a spoiler, man. You got to give alerts to that kind of stuff. I started typing it in the script and I was like, oh shit, am I supposed to read? Should I read this? Like, if I read this, am I going to get in trouble or are they going to blame Jeff? And I am Jeff. So you know what? I'm just going to censor that. I thought that was funny. Lil Mun's number one, a first-time poster, said he loves opening a box and seeing legible player aids for every player, not just one or two to share. Absolutely, that is a fantastic example. Thank you very much for that. Welcome to the channel. I agree 100%. I have seen both of those not go the right way, right? I have seen just one player aid. Oh my gosh, my favorite game, The Age of Atlantis, has something like it's like a 10.5 by 11. It's this really weird sheet of paper that you cannot photocopy. It doesn't fit on a standard photocopier. And it's got microscopic font, and there's one of them. And it covers all the different buildings that you can make for each player, including all the asymmetrical factions on one sheet. And so there's no way to easily say, okay, here's yours, here's yours, here's yours, here's yours. It's stupid. I hated that about that game. Everything else about that game is really, really good. But completely agree with you. And lastly, Jeremy Brooks said he just loves seeing punch boards. He said there's something just satisfying about punching out all those little game pieces. Man, I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes some of that thrill of the box. In fact, I tell you, as much as I don't like to plug other channels, No Pun Included did an episode a while back, not too long ago on their channel about arousal. And they did, not that kind, calm down, but they did this whole thing about sort of your excitement and your arousal levels when it comes to getting a game, opening the game, and then your arousal plummets as you learn the game. Starts to come back up a bit with your first play, and then sort of peters off, and then in often cases drops. And maybe why you never even get back to that game. And it was a really interesting article. He kind of waxed on a bit, but it was a real neat sort of piece that he put together. He was actually referencing a scientific study that ended up being completely debunked, which I thought was really fascinating. But he talked about that, just that same thing. When you're punching out those boards, that's like the most excited you can be in some cases. That might be the most excited you ever get about some of your games, which is just really, really interesting. So yeah, again, I know what you mean there. There was one other comment, and this person posted on my TikTok video, which got like 800, 900 views. I was really excited about that. And I told them to come and post it here in the channel, and they did not. And I was very, very bummed about that. But Orca on TikTok said 2 resource trays like the game Parks has. And I really thought that was a great example. I hadn't even thought about that. But I'll tell you what, as I have gotten some games in recently that does that, and I couldn't agree more. When you've got 2 different resource trays for a game, that means that when you're playing a 4-player game, you don't have the resources sitting far away from at least two of the players at the table, and they're constantly going, well, can you hand me a steel? Can you hand me a gold? Can you hand me $5? Can you, whatever? And you're sitting there trying to plan your turn going, what? Yeah, fine. Especially if that player is someone like Matt Ball, who is kicking your ass in the game, and you're constantly funneling them resources. Yeah, here's 5 money. I've had 1 money for this entire game, you jerk. You know what? Just take the resource tray. Go away. Yeah, absolutely. When you've got 2 resource trays and you got split up in a way that 2 people can kind of dip into it. Although I will say that for me, and the game Andromeda's Edge did this. It had 2 resource trays and an odd number of resources. That drove me crazy because who gets the extra energy? Who gets the extra steel or the extra ice? I don't realize how OCD I can be until something like that happens, and it pisses me off. But I'm going to use this opportunity. First of all, thank you for all the comments. Thank you for the first-time posters. Thank you to the TikTokers. Glad to see some participation here. It's glad to have some good stuff to chat about here. But I'm going to segue without a musical interlude into a quick little chat about 3D printing. So I have here my overhead camera set up, and this is Space Station Phoenix. I'm not standing this up on its edge, and you'll see why here in a minute. Now, everything is not completely complete with this 3D insert, but I actually want to show you. This is almost going to kind of be like a re-unboxing of this. So I want to pop the lid off and kind of show you what I've been working on. So I've got all my different player boards here. That's the main board. These are other boards for like this is for your different aliens and such. These are what are these called? Neutral ships that players can use. Rule book. And you want to talk about, by the way, very, very fine print. Look at this stuff. I know you can't even, getting the glare is difficult, but look at this. I need to get like that before you can read this thing. It's absurd how small this print is. And we were making some fun of this when we were at Cabin Con a couple weeks ago. But look at this. So I have been 3D printing like crazy this week. Here are all of the different aliens. Now these don't get spread into individual containers. They literally stay in this bag, and you just randomly draw a number based on player count. So I didn't need to make a compartment for that. But I do have what I'm kind of use as a dice tray here. I'm going to throw some felt on this at some point to make it not as noisy on the table. But the biggest thing with this game are these tiles. So when you're playing the game, you have these tiles that make your space station. And you can see they come in 3 different sizes, and they come in 3 different colors. So there's kind of a pink one, kind of a cyan type color, and then these brown ones. But you don't use all these in every game. You may, based on the player count, you're going to use so many of these 8 pieces. And so when we were doing this, when we played it at the cabin, Katie set out the ones that we were going to need, and she kind of just put them up end to end. We were playing on a huge table so that we could get away with it. But then when I played it with my wife at home on our dining room table, which is round, which is a terrible game table type, I had to keep them stacked. And then, of course, they kept sliding all over the place. So the way that I made these trays is that it's actually a 2-piece tray. So it acts as a lid, and the lid does kind of snap on, but then you can also use it as an additional tray. So now I can have the pieces on the table that we're playing with, and they're organized by their type and size. And this, which has the excess pieces, can just stay in the box. This took a lot of designing. I think I went through 3 iterations of this, which is the one downside to doing 3D printing and 3D design. But when this finally came together, I was so thrilled with it. And I want to show you what else I have in here, because you probably already see that there's a resource tray here in the bottom of this box. And I'm going to get to those here in just a second, as soon as I get this put away. And then this just kind of slides in and snaps, just like that. And can hang it, doesn't come apart, very nice. So let me get these out of the way. Now, like I said, I'm not completely finished. I only have 2 of the 4 player color trays. I'm printing something else right now, so the blue and yellow will occur probably tomorrow. I've got just these kind of angled pieces, obviously are meant to fit up against these things. So here's the dice you use in the game. And like I said, I'm hoping that I'll be able to use this tray as a little dice tray. that worked quite well. I've got here, this is just literally an excess compartment. Sometimes you just kind of end up with extra space you don't even need, including this tray, which I have nothing to do with. So that's just going to sit there. Here I've got these are your human pieces that you're going to use a number of these based on player count. Here are your player boards, which kind of form the hub of each of your space stations. And you'll see that I kind of 3D printed this so that I don't have to print this huge floor. This is just hollow opening on the bottom. But also it saves weight, it saves plastic. And again, it's a lot less likely to curl off the bed plate of the 3D printer if you're not trying to do this massive flat sheet of plastic. So this actually printed quite easily. I've got a card tray, which is a little snug in here. I'm actually going to reprint this probably tonight, just a millimeter thinner. But I did try to make this big enough to fit some sleeved cards. You can kind of see that I have some play in this, hopefully enough to fit sleeved cards, although I won't bother sleeving them myself. These are the hub trays, which fit the different hubs. There are advanced and basic hubs. They don't really need to be kept separate, but they are. And then here we go. This is what I wanted to talk about, were these two resource trays. I went through a lot of variations on this thing because I wanted to design them in a way that they could kind of, I'll show it to you on my side camera. So they just kind of slightly nest into each other, just enough that they can't slide apart. And keeps them kind of in place in the box. Now they don't have lids. The idea is that once you put all the boards in here, and even then I actually still have about 3 or 4 millimeters of spare space on top. I might get just a piece of foam or something here to put in the bottom of the box to kind of take up that space. But the idea is that with all the trays and boards and such on top, there will be nowhere for anything to go. Nowhere for anything to go. Yeah, I said that right. But you'll see here, I've got these different inserts. I kind of did this with these colored inserts you can kind of see. And it kind of makes it easier when you empty everything out of these trays. You know where everything goes back. I've done 3D prints before where I've tried to put like the name of the component into the 3D print, but depending on what goes in there, the raised text may not look right. You can't always indent the text or it won't really be very legible. It doesn't look very right. You've got to really do large font with a 3D printer to make it look normal, and I just don't like taking up that kind of space. And of course, you got these small little compartments. If I need to try and put water in here, it's just not going to look right. But anyways, yeah, I did the same thing. I did the 2 component trays. I mean, you might be able to tell there's plenty of open space in these trays. They're nowhere near full. I could have probably put everything into one tray, but I just love that idea of being able to separate for a 4-player game. And if a 2-player game, I only need 1 tray. I don't need all the resources, so I can just kind of leave the other half of them in the box, and it makes perfect sense. I've been having so much fun 3D printing lately, and in fact, the one thing that I've been messing around with, and Katie and Greg, if they're watching, know what this is. So this is your standee for the game. So when you're taking an action, you put this little standee onto the card to indicate I'm using this ship. You got your card out and you put your standee on it. Okay, that is what I am doing on my turn. But it's a space station. You're building a space station. I think the idea is that your ship is like docking at your space station to do stuff, and you're kind of using it. And I was just so disappointed in that little standee that I actually went and 3D printed my own space station. And I'll show you this on the overhead camera because it is incredibly detailed. There you go. You can see all the little details on this thing, all the little chimneys and such on that hub, all the little kind of modules, resonance modules. I even had these tiny little wires right there that are connecting up some of these modules. And all of this design came from, I just dropped it on the floor. That's really convenient. All of this came from just studying this box. So just sort of looking at the dimensions of this, using the hubs, the player hub, for the sort of like starting dimensions, and then actually using this image right here, this kind of distant space station in the background, is what I used to sort of model all of this. And you can see, like, it's pretty damn similar. Obviously, I can't get the lighting effect. Also, with an FDM printer, that's the kind that inject the plastic. There's only so much you can do detail-wise with these things. Now, right now, as I speak, in fact, I bet the timer is going to go off on my phone here in a moment. But as we speak, I'm printing another version of this over at the house where each layer of plastic going down is 0.05 millimeters. Incredibly thin to try and get optimal detail out of each one of these pieces, because I actually have 45-degree like chamfers at the top of each of these little huts, and you kind of see it. This was printed at 0.1 millimeters a layer, which has always been the most detailed I've ever known it you can do. I didn't even realize that my printer had a 0.05 option. I checked it about an hour, maybe hour and a half in, and it looked really good. So we'll see. It hadn't gotten to the top yet. It hadn't gotten to any of these details. So I'm really curious to see how it's going to come out. But I have had just an absolute blast putting this thing together, just designing it, tweaking it. I've wasted way too much time on it, and it's why I haven't been playing any games. But I've played a couple, so let me clean up my table here and tell you about them. All right, just 2 games here to chat about in this episode. The first one I've talked about before. I'll skim over this one kind of quickly. This was Patterns, another of the, what are they called? The mandala games for 2 players. This is from Lookout Games. We played this at the house a couple of weeks ago, and we played it again over the weekend at the local speakeasy after we went to a comedy show, which was actually kind of nice. I really just like this game. It is so simple. The rules are so simple. I was able to kind of refresh my wife on it very, very quickly, and we just got into it, and I actually thought she was doing pretty well for a moment, and then all of a sudden she goes, "I'm out of moves. There's nothing else I can do." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? I got like 10 moves left." And she goes, "Yeah, I know." And the thing is that when one player runs out of things to do, the other player gets to do everything that they can. You literally just get to make all their moves in a row, uninterrupted, and kind of finish off everything that they can finish. And I did. I took 8 or 10 more moves and ended up with like a 30-point spread. I actually felt kind of bad because, you know, I thought we were doing kind of well and kind of even keel, and all of a sudden I just took off with it. But I want my daughter to check this out because it feels like hard checkers, right? Like, that's not a good way to put it. It invokes, I think, chess moves. And the thing is that you're trying to build these patterns of colors, just orthogonal sort of little round tokens that all have to kind of be connected to each other orthogonally. And the largest pattern you can make, you only get to make 1 pattern of each color. There's 6 colors that you're working with. And the later in the game that you start a new pattern, the more points it will be worth. But of course, the less time that you have to grow that pattern, maybe. What I really started to see in this with this recent play was that once you establish a color region, you can expand onto it. You can either expand to it if there's already a face-down token next to it. If you're doing blues, you have a bunch of face-up blues, and there's a face-down blue right next to it, you just flip it over. That's your entire move, is you flip over that token, you expand that region. And if there's another blue and another blue right next to it, you just kind of keep going, unless your opponent claims one of them at sort of like the other end, and then you have to leave one of them face-down in between, because you have to keep track of 2 different regions of that same color. And that's a move that you can use to block somebody, is that they've got a real long pattern that they're working on, you start the other end of it, and then that way they can't, use the whole thing. But then what I also realized is I was building like an orange pattern, and it was only worth a point each, but I had a pretty large pattern of it, and there was another couple of orange tokens that were 1 space away, and it was like a yellow that was in between these 2 different patterns of orange. And so what I did was I started a yellow pattern, and then I swapped that yellow token that was on the board to put, and that's what I did. I had an orange token that was over by my blue region or something. And so what I did was I managed to get myself a blue. I swapped it with that orange. Now I have an orange in my bowl ready to go, and I swapped it with that yellow that was in between the 2 different orange patterns. And all of a sudden I not only expanded my region, but gave me even more room to expand into. My wife had already started her orange region, so she couldn't do anything to stop me. And just seeing those moves and trying to kind of reverse calculate, go, okay, I need to replace this with another color so that I can expand this region. How do I get that color swapped out? And so you're kind of sitting there and you're just looking at all the different moves you can make, and then you finally kind of get it, and you just start swapping stuff all over the place. It was really, really exciting. It is so simple, such a small little box, but there's a lot in here. It's really, really crunchy and thinky, and I've really, really been enjoying this one. Patterns by Lookout Games. The last one I will chat about here for a bit is Beyond the Horizon. This is the sequel to the Beyond the Sun game. This is designed by, I didn't remember the name, Dennis Chan or Chan, I'm guessing Chan. This is from Capstone Games. The original game is from Rio Grande Games, the Beyond the Sun game. And so Beyond the Sun was always sort of categorized. In fact, I talked about this in my Dice Tower review of it, I don't know, a year or so ago, is that everyone always said, oh, Beyond the Sun is the tech tree game. It's a tech tree game. And I played even like 10 clips back to back of people saying tech trees, it's tech trees, all the tech trees. It's not a tech tree game. Because in a tech tree, each one of those technologies improves upon the one before it. So you have the ability to, do something and get 2 movement, and then you upgrade that next tech, and now you get 4 movement, for example. That's not how this works. You have a technology that might be in sort of the realm of movement, and so the one may say, okay, you can upgrade a colonist and move it 2 spaces. And then the next card might say, when you move, you get to do some other benefit. So it's kind of related to movement, but it's not necessarily improving that other technology, and you're not using that previous technology either. They're 2 separate actions. So each sort of path that you take along this alleged tech tree is giving you just more actions to take. So as you sort of discover and research these new technologies, you're just giving yourself more things that you can do in this single pawn orc replacement game. Now, in Beyond the Sun, there was a sideboard, and I swear no review ever talked about that board, or at least didn't give it much attention. That sideboard had 4 little locations, 3 or 4 locations if I remember, that you would put a card on, and you were trying to move your ships to these cards. You were trying to get sort of the strongest military strength value on this. Your ships were just represented by little dice that had numbers, I think 1 to 4 on them. And so when you had ships of various values, you'd add up those values, and that was your military strength. And whoever had the predominant amount of strength got to put one of their resource tokens out there, and that improved the production of their own engine, their own sort of like civilization. And that made sense, but it was this kind of frustrating area control. Actually, it wasn't even area control, it was area control, area majority, king of the hill kind of a thing. So if I had 4 strength on a card and I had a token on it and it was improving my resource engine, and then suddenly someone brought in a fleet of 7, well, they got to bump my token off and put their own token on it. Now all of a sudden my production goes down. And if you're sitting there sort of counting on your next move, and all of a sudden it gets kind of bumped away from you, it gets to be a little irritating. And I get it, but it's just not my style of play, right? That's just not the way I like to do things. This game, the sort of tech tree element, whatever it is, stays the same. The whole sort of research technology progression and the way that you're getting additional actions by researching new techniques or technologies, that's all the same. Nothing really changes on the main board. However, that sideboard is gone and has instead been replaced by these hexagonal tiles that build an ever-growing map. So you start on sort of you have a central location. Each player has a starting tile arranged around that, and in an interesting move, players cannot even stop on your starting tile. They can move through it, but they cannot stay on it. As more tiles get discovered, players can be on tiles together, but just being on a tile doesn't do anything. You have to first sort of colonize that tile, sort of build a village, if you will, and then that will start to give you some additional production, and then you can later come in with a military of sorts, which is really just a different type of a token, different type of component, and then you fortify that village, and it becomes a city at that point, and again, further increases your production. And so that city, that whole map that you're building between players becomes a really significant portion of the game. And unlike the original game where when you colonized a planet or a system in the Beyond the Sun game, that card came to you, you kept your token on it, and it just kind of sat off on the side. Yes, that was worth points to you, but it was no longer part of the game. It didn't do anything else anymore. You couldn't do anything with it. In Beyond the Horizon, you can at least revisit a tile that's already been colonized. It stays out there. Like I said, you can come back later and fortify it, which another player can do. They don't mess up your own engine. They don't affect your original colony. You still get all of your production from that. You still get your endgame points and all that from that tile. But either you or another player can then move on to that tile and fortify it and gain additional benefits. So of course, if you obviously want to be able to do both, because then you're getting the most out of that tile, but there's absolutely no negative effect on you if someone comes in and fortifies the tile that you already colonized. And that I really, really enjoyed. I really liked the fact that it was much less confrontational. It was much less, it wasn't even that the original game felt confrontational, but it had that random element of, okay, I've got this, I'm working on this, and now something comes in and just knocks it out from underneath me. Here it's not that bad. You may have had enough strength on there. Maybe you just didn't get the action triggered yet to actually colonize it. Maybe someone sweeps in and takes it from you. But even in our 2-player game, that didn't happen very often. And with a 4-player game, you are sort of incentivized to spread away from each other. And you're very, very able to. You're able to sort of turtle into your own corner of the map. Unless someone builds something that just happens to be really, really juicy, and you want to try and run over there and build on it, you can do that. There's also this idea that if a tile comes out and no one has colonized or fortified it yet, you can actually go there and build a building on top of that tile. And it's kind of a weird element because it's like you're replacing an entire village, maybe even a city, with a building. I thought that was kind of strange. I almost kind of wish they did that with like a separate card that maybe you could kind of place over top of it and do something different with it. I don't know. But that's kind of felt like a weird element to me. Like, okay, I'm moving from village to village to village, and all of a sudden I'm crossing a single factory of the same size as that entire city. Anyways, a minor gripe. I think the much bigger gripe with this was a few things. The production value of this is nowhere near what Beyond the Sun was. Your player components, instead of just, now granted, I don't really like dice placement games, and that's kind of what Beyond the Sun felt like, because like I said, the ships are just dice with different values on it, and you're just pipping it up or down to indicate the strength of that component, but they were still nice plastic colored dice. In this game, they are these kind of wooden, almost looks like a wine goblet, and you actually are supposed to place it upside down or right side up, depending on where it is on your board, which was just unnecessarily fiddly. But even worse than that, that pawn represents one of your citizens, and it can either be an explorer, maybe a different name, but I think it was an explorer, or it can be a military unit. And the way that you denote that is with these little cardboard tokens that literally just sit on top of that wooden component, which means they are very, very easily knocked off. They are two-sided with different values on each side, so you might knock it off and not remember what side it was on, and then suddenly you're sitting there going, oh, hang on, what was this? Was this a 2 or a 3? I can't remember. And I think the reason that they did that, instead of using numbered dice, is that you're supposed to be piece limited on how many of each strength of unit you can have. You didn't have that limitation in Beyond the Sun. They only want you to have, for example, 2 level 5 or 2 level 6 infantry or explorers, as opposed to just having as many of them as you can get to. I don't really know why, because they're hard enough to get to them to that level. There are some achievements of having a certain strength of explorers out on the board, but being able to have that across 2 pawns versus 4 pawns doesn't really make that big of a difference, because you can kind of split those upgrade values typically. At least I think you can. Maybe you can't. Maybe that's why. Anyways, so there was that. There was also the fact that a lot of the card colors literally didn't match. There's no expansions or anything in here, but I had a number of the technology cards that had a slightly different color ink to the back of them than other cards, which of course makes them very easy to tell apart. And there were some other just some weird things. That was it. The art, while it's fine, looks like it could be AI. I'm not saying that it is. I need to look into it, actually. But for example, your player boards have this really nice image on the background of your player board, and it shows like some gold dice, and it shows like a dagger, and it shows some crown, some gold jewelry, and little rings, and like an old book, and maybe like a little quill, right? And then a cell phone. And it's like, okay, one of these is absolutely not like the others. What the hell is a cell phone doing in this image? And it's jarring to look at. Now, luckily, once you cover this thing with all your components, you really can't even see the art anymore. But as I was setting this game up, I was like, oh, what the hell is this? So I don't know. There's definitely some questionable things in here. The big conversation out on Board Game Geek is that in Beyond the Sun, you had these player boards that you handed out to players, and you could all play with like the same side where everyone was kind of doing like the same thing, or you could use these other boards that were more asymmetric, and they gave you very small little tweaks in how you did things that just kind of made some asymmetry in the game. In this game, there is no way to all play as the same faction unless you go and photocopy these cards, but there are 4 two-sided government cards. It's only a 4-player game, so you have to use them all, but you can kind of randomize the sides and which side you use. But a lot of the common conversation out on BGG is that 2 of those cards, at least one of them, possibly 2 of them, are drastically overpowered. And people are reporting that they've played 3-4 players, and the player who had that card, maybe those 2 cards, were just way ahead of everyone else to the point that the 3rd and 4th players literally just resigned. Like, I am so far back in this that there's no sense in playing this anymore, and I'm literally becoming pissed off. And it just happened to be. We did not look into that until after we had played the game. Just my wife and I played this, and we just, by complete luck, got the 2 better cards. In fact, you're supposed to have a card per player to draft. I added 1 extra just so we'd have a little bit more decision space. And my wife picked her first one. I looked at the 2 and I was like, well, this one looks way better than that one. And I was right. Now, I will say that our final score was only maybe 4 or 5 points apart, which was surprising because I really thought I was running away with this. Even my wife thought I was running away with this. I had a ton of technologies discovered on the main board. I had, researched a bunch of those techs. I was going to get a ton of points in the end game from my technologies, but she had really played the map quite effectively. I had points there, just not as many as her. And so when we started off in the score sheet, and I don't remember how the score sheet, the order of things, how it went, but right off the get-go, I had like a good 20, 25 point lead. And then the next 4 or 5 items, she outscored me on every one of them, bringing my lead down to, like I said, like 4 or 5 points. So I liked the game. I liked it better than Beyond the Sun. I liked that side map a lot better than Beyond the Sun, but the components are questionable. I'm already sitting here thinking about, am I going to bother 3D printing stuff to maybe fix those finicky little player pieces? I don't know that it's worth it, honestly. There's, like I said, all this kind of discussion surrounding these technology cards. Now, I'm interested in trying to play this at 3 or 4 players. I don't know if that'll get to happen. This game has just not reached that popularity level of Beyond the Suns. I don't know how well it's going to happen. Maybe at like a RiverCon or the Dice Tower Retreat, something like that. Like I said, I like the game, but I think it's got enough flaws to it that might just keep it from getting played that often. Anyways, that is Beyond the Horizon. All right, so real quick for question of the week next week, and I'm going to apologize. One of my viewers, one of the followers, that doesn't sound right, but anyways, someone had sent me one of those "How can I help you?" questions, and I don't remember who it was, and I apologize. It was a good couple of weeks ago, and they asked a question, and I responded to them, and I said, hey, that's a really, really good question. I'm actually going to use it as a question of the week, because I think I'd like to get more input from other people and not just myself, and I feel like this is the perfect environment to do that. The question that they asked was, how do you go about selling your unwanted, gently played games? And that's a really, really, really good question. And the thing is that depending on where you are in the country, depending on even where you are in the world, there is a huge plethora, a huge spread of different answers. I know of someone locally who sells a lot of games. He has just a massive collection of games. I think he's been downsizing, but I also know he's been still getting stuff. So I don't know. I don't know where he stands there. But he tends to sell games for more than he paid for them. I've never had any luck trying to do that whatsoever, but he's always telling me how much he sold these games for. And I know that there's a website that he uses to do it. It's not one that I'm even familiar with. I'll try and check with him and get that before episode 57. But anyways, so how do you go about selling your games? Obviously, there's going to be, flea markets. There's going to be maybe conventions. There might be local stores that let you sell games, or sort of may take your games and sell them. They're obviously going to give you less money than what they're going to sell it for. So there is that to take into consideration. It's kind of like selling a used car. You're going to get more money if you can sell it directly to the buyer. If you try and go through a middleman, whether it's a website, Noble Knight Games, or whether it's a local game store, you're going to lose some of that profit. Just no two ways around it. But anyways, I'm curious, how do you go about selling your games? Do you like to use a local store? Is there like a particular event that you like to go to? Is there a favorite website of yours? Obviously, we're going to see some eBay. We're going to probably see some Geek Market. All of those are fine options as well. But anyways, maybe we can help this friend out and come up with some good ideas on how to sell games. That is it for episode 56. I'm gonna have a little bit more of that beer because I'm definitely getting a little dry in my voice here. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for being here. As always, I really enjoyed this question of the week conversation for this episode. Thanks again for that. And folks, I'll chat with you soon. Cheers.